Relearning is dead. Yes, you heard me right. Relearning is dead, and we are in this weirdly exciting journey of learning synthesis. I'm just trying to copy the opening from my favorite podcast, Advertising is Dead. Hi, I am Prashant Uttekar, a learning enthusiast, and you are listening to the Relearning podcast, where we have an expert, and today it's Varun Duggirala, to take us back to basic, help you and me to relearn. Varun is a co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, India's new age creative agency, host of renowned podcast Advertising is Dead and Use This Information, and host of Future Forward sessions with Upgrad and LBV. All this is very recent. He's actually an engineer who decided to work in PR but pivoted to being a creative producer at MTV and Channel V. And while he wore so many hats from operations to finance to regular janitor duties in the years since Rohit Raj and him started The Glitch, making brands really very cool. Welcome to the show, Varun.
Thanks for having me, Prashant. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, I've had many a bit of a weird journey to get where I'm at. Just like if you talk about all the stuff I've done, say when you read it out, it kind of realize all the twists and turns.
I hope the intro was obviously it was nowhere close to what you do, but yeah, I like I said, I'm just copying you.
No. So my intros are generally very free flow. I like actually sometime back about I think it was 3 months ago, I was told by someone saying, "Will you stop just like impromptu saying it because you keep on going forever?" Because till 3 months ago, it was always like whatever comes to the mind, just say it and get it done with. So I've
Superb,
thankfully moved to a more structured format now.
superb, and thank you for doing this, Varun. Means a lot to me, especially because, and I've told you this as well that I literally I heard your episode with Cyrus, and from there on, from first episode of Advertising being is dead to the success it has in terms of top podcasts in the country is just simply amazing. And you just inspired me and many like me to do podcasts and things that you like, you just go about it.
So it has been one of those things where I just have fun doing it, and thankfully it has done well while you're having fun. So I enjoy hosting. I just generally enjoy being on podcasts. So whenever someone asks me to be on theirs, I try to make sure I figure out a way to kind of be a part of it because I enjoy it.
Superb, and thank you for doing that. Right, from being creative chief at The Glitch and hosting such variety of topics and having dabbled into so many aspects of agency, what has been your constant in your relearning?
So I am a hoarder of information, right? I always like to consume as much information as possible. Read something somewhere. No, I think the internet was my biggest revelation because it allowed me to just kind of add as much info into my mind as possible. So that's been my process. Is that there's always something you can learn.
Right.
Somewhere, and I try to do that because it always helps. It always helps in some conversation you have somewhere else, in a meeting, in something you just want to post. Sometimes it's always a good thing to hoard your mind,
Yeah.
which also means that I spend way too much time in front of a screen, and ever since Apple has introduced screen time, it shows me how terrible that is. That I range in like 7-8 hours and above in a day, which is a bit insane, but
Oh God.
yeah.
But has that got you in trouble anytime? What I mean by that is
Which hmm?
getting this information out of sight, out of mind, or out of the blue rather.
Hmm.
And I have experienced this with my wife
Hmm.
because I give references out of the blue because it stuck with me and I
Yeah.
just blurt it out, and people have no head or tail of it. So we probably have to go back and tell them everything about it.
No. So people who know me really well tend to ignore me when I get into too much information territories. But I think it has its pros and cons. Sometimes when I put something across, I've also been proved wrong. Saying where something I read was totally like against what it should have been.
Okay.
And luckily, I have people around me who will call it out, and then I will say, okay, fine, I need to relearn that part of it because I supposedly consumed wrong information. But yeah, so but I have this theory about saying, okay, you tend to say stupid stuff all the time. Sometimes when you say stupid stuff, you actually learn something better. So then I just take it that way.
Oh, okay. I'll star mark that, and that will be my go-to line from here on. So thanks. That helped. You make brands such as Netflix, Close Up, LinkedIn, Unilever, Shutterstock look so cool and relevant. How do you ensure your content team is updated and stays relevant at all times?
To be very honest, I have very little role to play in that part of it. We have a great team, right? The whole point, which Rohit and I from day one, and then Pooja ever since she kind of came on, is
Right.
had is the fact that we're only as good as the team that we have and the people we have as leadership, right? So Our only job becomes largely to be able to feed them as much information and give them enough opportunities to showcase it as possible. So we spend a lot of time in that. I mean, it could just mean that, okay, people are interested in understanding audio, so let's get Spotify to come in and do a workshop. If you have an animator who wants to, create lenses because he wants to
Right.
move to the AR space.
Right.
You figure a way someone who's an expert in snap lenses comes and does that. So we look at it from that lens. We have some really really smart people in the organization. I give them the credit for all the great work. We just facilitate things and just push them in the right direction sometimes, and take care of stuff which they honestly should not be taken care of, which is the more headache parts of running organizations. We
The
try to keep
janitor
the
part.
headaches away from them. Yeah, the janitor part, as I call it. We keep that away from them as much as possible, because that is what leadership brings with it. Leadership brings with it all the janitor duties anybody can think of.
You literally spoke like a leader. That's for sure. In all this, help me understand if how do you how does that sense of relevancy comes into picture, because it can go in many ways,
Mm.
in either ways. Most of the time,
Yeah.
if it works, amazing, but this can go the other way as
Mm.
well, not for you, probably for the people.
Oh yeah, of course. So this is how we see it. We've never followed an extremely structured approach in how we grow as an organization, how people get trained, how people do their work, etc. Everybody can come into it, add their own bit to the culture, add their own bit to the work. But over time, there are a few things that kind of stay, just in terms of how we look at creative, how we look at content. Being a part of creative has always been how we do things, right? Because we started
Right.
off as a production unit, became that. So it seamlessly becomes something which everybody understands, and we obviously have to then, anybody new coming in now, it's obviously a lot more in terms of can we train them, because earlier it was easy because
Right.
anybody joining in was joining in and had their fingers dirty in every single thing that we were doing. So it does get tricky. There are times when mistakes are made, and honestly, it's good because the only issues and mistakes happen twice. Is how we look at it, because the first mistake teaches you a lot, but if you don't learn from that, then there's an issue with the second mistake. So I mean, that's how we take it. There are ups and downs, but if you take a macro point of view and look at it from
Yeah.
a wider lens,
Right.
the smaller pieces, smaller issues, they iron themselves out over time, as long as you have an eye on the wider lens. Things get. I mean, some of these smaller things don't matter.
Superb. When I was starting this podcast, the Relearning podcast, one of my faintest, not faintest memory, one of the vivid memory I have from Advertising Is Dead is Rohit and your first project, where the client said, you'll do this and that, and you said yes, because obviously it was a first project, and I love that
Huh.
story. But you ensured it happens.
Hmm.
Could you tell
We've
us
also
more
had
about
many
that?
times where things didn't happen. There are also many times things did not happen.
Right.
So we've had this tendency which we have reduced over the years. I've been in meetings, say someone giving me a website brief, and I had no idea how a website was made.
Right.
But I would let's say hustle my way through that. And at some point, call Rohit, said I agree to this. I'm now I've said yes, we have to do it, and we would figure it out. Or cases where somebody would come up with, okay, can you guys make an AV for us, which is what that project
Right.
was, I remember. And Rohit said, okay, what if the AV was in 3D, and they could watch it coming at them? And we came out, and he's like, okay, I've said it. I'm not entirely sure how we will do it. Theoretically, it should work, right? So, and we had a 10-day deadline. Thankfully, we figured a way to do it. And we didn't deliver Avatar level 3D. We delivered Chota Chetan level 3D, but it was 3D nonetheless. And we ended up selling a bunch of those. I remember that point of time. But over the years, I mean, we've had cases where we said we will do something, had a phenomenal reference point, etc., failed miserably at doing it, right?
Oh, okay.
So we've had those as well. It comes with its own perils, but
Obviously. Yeah.
many times it's important to kind of jump off that whole thing in terms of saying, okay, let's try and make this happen because it's exciting. More times than not, if you have the right set of people working, it happens. There are a few times it doesn't.
And you were spot on, right? In terms of scalability, of course, that time it was just two of you to begin with, and I'm sure
Yeah.
people joined. Now, in your agency and your wherever you go now, if you come across someone like that, do you have an eye to catch someone like that? That okay, I see a Varun or a Rohit in them right now, and he'll just take it up, and or probably they'll fail
Oh, wait.
miserably. You already oversee it.
we have people we have people who are far smarter than us right now in the organization. They give us a complex. But honestly, I feel that the people who work across the agency space now, I mean, not just our agency, right? You talk about
Right.
agencies like a Web Chutney, you talk about someone. They've all come in with such an interesting mindset of what advertising means to them. I think we almost look at it from the sense of what it used to mean. But I think how they all look at it is so digital, so native in that sense. As I heard this from someone the other day, and I've been using this a lot, is saying that this is the first generation who've been born with creation tools in their hands, right? They've been able to
Mm,
create content. They've been able to add those, like I can't make a, I mean, nobody can make a TikTok video now, but I can't make a TikTok video. I find it very, I mean, I get a little worried to make one, but for them it's so natural, right? It's a tool. So when you understand those tools of creation from day one, the way you look at advertising, the way you look at marketing
yeah.
just changes. It just evolves how you look at it. So we see a lot of them actually. So while we have a long interview process at which, and we do a lot of that, it comes down to almost that last bit of why, by saying, why is someone doing this? We never ask what is a 5-year plan. We'll always ask them saying, okay, what do you really, what do you enjoy doing? You know, what makes you want to do this? And whenever
Interesting.
we meet someone who has that, and if you enjoy it, then you will add a lot more to it.
You give an interesting insight, right? That talks about the age that we are in. You're absolutely right, and you've been talking about TikTok. You creating a TikTok video on many episodes, and
Still haven't done
unfortunately,
it.
yeah, obviously the universe has aligned itself. It's not possible, to do
Yeah.
this anymore. But yeah, fair enough. What were some of your insightful events that you recall about relearning?
It's an interesting thing, right? I have genuinely, I was never a fan of education.
Okay.
I don't think I've maybe I was just generally someone who got bored easily. I still am a person who gets bored very easily.
Yeah.
So I never really enjoyed school, never really enjoyed college. So I mean, I did a 4-year engineering degree in 6 years. So it shows that it wasn't because I
Foundation is
wanted to
strong.
learn more.
Sure.
Foundation is extremely strong, but I think what I've actually started to do over recent times is the fact that, especially digital ways of learning for me.
Uh-huh.
So I subscribe to masterclass. I do a lot of those courses. I
Interesting.
recently did the course that Scott Galloway has been putting out, which is the
Ah,
strategy sprint.
yes.
I'm doing another one by this YouTuber called Matt Devella, which is
Yeah.
started this thing called Slow Growth Academy. So it's the first course is about how do you form habits. Um,
Yeah.
so for me, the digital education space has really been a way for me to almost relearn learning itself, because I
Okay.
teach in a very engaging manner, and we don't realize that. I mean, I sit in classes with my 3-year-old, and I can think of many ways in which that experience would be made better for a 3-year-old. I mean, I know they're trying really hard,
Yeah.
and I know and I can understand how stressful that is for them. But so for me, that's been great. I mean, just the looking at the process of learning and how that could almost be changed for, like, because we're all different people, right? We all learn differently, and we unfortunately had an industrial form of
Yeah.
education saying, one set of people sit in one room and they all get taught the same way. We're all different people now, right? So that's been one of my strongest things the last year odd. I think I've spent the entire stay-at-home period just like learning
Very
ways of
interesting.
learning, if you want to call it that.
So this entire
The
pandemic is an
others,
insight for you?
yeah, totally. On education, for me, it's a huge insight point. I've also discovered that I like to work from home and they like to live in shorts, but I think that's a different insight altogether.
So
Um,
this on this point, right? At least I don't know, our generation. My um, dream job was to go in
yeah,
shorts, have a pony, have good beard, and that was my idea of being cool and working, right? So it has happened.
I did all of that. That's why I went to Channel V and MTV because could wear shorts and go to work.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it has happened. But yeah, there's a price to pay, and it's really very long.
yeah. Uh, but also, I think what's been interesting is that I've just genuinely, I mean, just going back to the relearning part, right? I think I never looked at advertising the way I do now. I think
Okay.
especially ever since I started the podcast, for me, it's been a learning curve. I used to always look at advertising as one of those things that we do and it's part of our business, whereas my focus is primarily on the content and the production sides. And when I would understand it, I was a strong part of that entire thing, but my focus areas were almost like, let's say, parts of back end, etc. I
Right.
think the last 2 years of doing advertising is that has also made me almost like appreciate so many things about the advertising space, which I don't think I appreciated enough. Well, even though the podcast is called Advertising is Dead, I think there are so many things that I've almost like imbibed a lot more and understood a lot more about it, right? So I mean, the amount of research I do on the space now is far higher than I did for the first 8 years of Glitch. So it's
Ah,
almost maybe look at the field differently. It's very weird that the business didn't make me learn it, a podcast did, but fair enough.
no, that I think I'm in that journey too. You know, after my actual work, the day job, I obviously the house chores and everything that I do. So I sit at the podcasting work pretty much late in the night, and I'm expected to be tired. But that's the most insightful and the glowing face that you'll see on my face when I'm working on something. Because like you said, researching
Yeah,
stuff, having those connects, where is it going, what are the topics? Yeah.
true.
So I go to this quote at all times with Abhish, said it sometime back in one of the shows, things you do for the kitchen and things you do for your soul.
Yeah,
And it clearly shows.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Tanmay said this when he came on my podcast, right? He said that we all need to find our own feedback loop, and that feedback loop teaches you so many things because you're constantly learning from an audience, and you're learning from creating. So no matter what you do, that one feedback loop really helps expand your mind.
and that episode was so amazing. I also recall you mentioned about the VAC model, the visual,
Yeah,
auditory, and
yeah,
kinesthetic. That's something
yeah.
that in my industry is used as a base for any audience in
Mm,
organizations. So one
mm.
one content being in the form of visual, auditory, as well as kinesthetic. Many organizations are
Yeah,
trying to do this. Many fail at it because at the end it still becomes a presentation, right? So many organizations
true.
are getting there in that space. All right.
Yeah. No, but it's so we finally looking at those things, right? We never looked at those things seriously. It was always, like I said, a supply chain system of education or training and
Yeah.
everything else. And now we
Yeah. Yeah.
finally becoming more focused on people themselves.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, when Varun has achieved so much and done so many different things, when you get an untried, new, or untested idea from your team or from your client, what is your first go-to response?
I like to have a frame of reference. I'm one of those terrible people who doesn't ask for a reference, but I will generally have a reference for most things, right? So even if somebody doesn't have it, I kind of add on my two bits because that's how I've always worked. I mean, some people have an issue with their references, but I think a frame of reference helps. Don't copy it, but just
Yeah.
pick up certain elements from everywhere, so you at least have a way to show how that might be. So the best way is to have, let's say, a set of 2 to 3 different things, and you have some pieces there, but eventually what comes out is the original idea still has multiple references. Um,
Yeah.
so when someone comes up with it, we're all very open. What I try to do, and that's been one of my pet peeves over the years, is that I try to put a sort of framework around anything that is created,
Right.
because while the ideas could be fresh and new, some of the frameworks that we have, especially on the content side, etc., you learn a lot from them. So like
Right.
I still use television frameworks, what I learned working television in content today,
Interesting.
because some of those frameworks, they just kind of help. They'll give you a certain flow. They'll help you organize your work a lot smarter, and they save you a lot of time. And the results don't vary. So the results are still what you want out of it. You still get something that is as new age as you want it to be. So that's literally what I try to do. I try to put some structure around it, not to eat away the idea, but to almost help organize it. And so that's really what my general response has been.
So has this response been always this way, or is it over the years of experience and with so many relearnings or learnings on the way? What would have Varun in his 20s be, or think of a weird thought like this?
So I've actually always, so I'm a huge fan of formats.
Okay.
So I've always, so even when I was at Channel V or MTV in the early days, I would keep looking at everything. So I used to do a lot of reality TV work, right? So
Yeah.
what I would spend a lot of time doing is saying, okay, man, how is a Survivor formatted? How is
Right.
a Fear Factor formatted? So I look at all the global formats and see, and I learned that, I mean, that process for me got imbibed a lot because I used to work on the edit table a lot, right? So
Okay.
me and Saurabh, who actually incidentally now is at Glitch, and he leads our entire video function right now. So he and I go way back. So he and I used to do some of the edit segments together. He was an editor, and I was I
Okay.
think an assistant producer at that point of time. And what we would try and do is almost plan out how we would do the edit before we got into it. So we would not, it's not like we wouldn't have fun doing it, right? We would have a lot of fun putting it together. But because we had to do so much in so little
Yeah.
time, is that try and at least have a loose framework in place.
Fantastic.
So I want to try to bring that in. I mean, there are many times, and that doesn't mean I'm structured. I'm the most unstructured person you'll meet. I just like to have a broad idea of what it might look like. It might just be a sketch or just like some scribble on a piece of paper. It'll never be overtly structured because I can't do structured. But I think that helps. I mean, just having an outline
Yeah,
rather.
yeah, yeah. My reason for that is I'm extremely lazy, and I also work on a lot of edits. So to save that, I
We're all lazy,
better
buddy.
have I better have a good framework, so it becomes easier at the end. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we all lazy
Yeah.
people. That that's for sure, man.
We're a generation who's also, I think we laziness it's a good thing. You need to be, so there is this theory about laziness, right? Is the fact that when you're lazy, you can actually just be bored, and being bored is good because I shouldn't say this because I'm always overfeeding my mind, but being lazy kind of lets your mind relax because you're just like not doing anything. So there is good that comes from being lazy.
True, true, true. There's a basketball player called Joker or Jokic,
Hmm.
um, and his recent quote that is today morning, and he's a tall guy, and he's
Hmm.
tall and he's not so active. So
Hmm.
someone asked, where does this patience come from? He says, I'm just lazy. Patience is not a choice. There is no choice. It's not
Yeah.
that something I do. I'm just
Yeah.
that way. So yeah, but thanks. That's a great response, man. Moving on. Well, the next segment, Varun, is something directly copied from Advertising is Dead. Uh, and thanks for that, because of which I didn't really work hard in getting this segment of rapid fire round. Uh, so the questions have to be rapid, but you know what? As I have copied this format, my guests also have long answers. So please try to be spontaneous and rapid about
Hmm.
this. So
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
has,
Yeah.
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 Okay, superb. What is the strangest or the weirdest thing you did while attending a meeting or a webinar?
So I have this weird thing which I do, and I've been doing it since I was in school. I have a vivid imagination. So whenever I do get bored, I don't think I do it anymore. But in
Uh-huh.
school, and this is, I won't say in meetings I do it anymore because I don't think. School, I had a teacher who was boring. I would imagine them in diapers, and then suddenly the entire class would be more entertaining for me. I don't. I will not admit that I haven't done that in a long time.
Okay.
But I mean, I can very easily zone out and
Okay.
imagine something else in the room. So that has been my weirdest thing. I can imagine anything weird in the room because my mind. I can physically be in a space, but my mind can be somewhere else altogether. So that is my
All right.
secret.
That is weird. Good. I like that. If not content chief, host, PR, producer, finance guy,
Hmm.
janitor, what would Varun Duggirala be?
Um, I actually always really wanted. I think there was a side of me that really wanted to act at one point of time.
Oh, yes. I can't say I
Excited
have
by
not
it,
heard that. I've heard that.
and yeah, so act and dance. So in my early days in MTV and Channel V, I used to do like he would have those guys who would play smaller roles in
Oh, yeah,
ads
yeah, yeah.
or
Paid.
the kind. So I've done all of that to just make extra money. So I've done that in my early years. I've also done a lot of free acting for people. Someone like Rohit. Like Rohit, when you look at his show reel during his time in Channel V, half the promos had me in it. When he couldn't afford an actor, free actor was Varun, so just call him.
Superb.
Um, so I've enjoyed that a lot, but I don't think I wasn't necessarily as ambitious
Okay.
with what's there. I should enjoy coding though. Coding was a great love of mine that engineering killed in my head. So it was like I used to code when I was bored, and then I
Oh,
started engineering and I never coded again.
engineering took away your coding.
Yeah.
That's bad. So you don't have one answer or one role in case you were not all these things. You've done so many things.
No, I think that thing has changed every year.
Superb. The next one might seem a familiar question. What is your recommendation for a podcast, book, or a TV
Hmm.
series?
So I'm actually watching. Let me say it's our podcast, right? I've recommended this a couple of times when they finish their season. It's a podcast called Inside Voices.
Inside
Um,
Voices. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great podcast because the host interviews podcast hosts
Yeah.
and they talk at inner voices or inside voices. But I think what has been great about that is they talk about what they feel about their own voice, because most podcast hosts don't like their own voices,
Oh
but they also
yes,
kind of talk about what their voices mean, right? And I think that's really important, because most times as podcast hosts, you kind of think about, okay, fine, what do I really want to stand for in terms of my voice and what I'm saying, etc. Inside voices, that's what it is.
inside voice,
Um,
right?
Inside voices. So I think that's a great one to listen to. It is generally like just gives you a lot of perspective, and it's very nice to listen to a lot. Weirdly enough, and I've just discovered it off late is this one which is hosted. Maybe I forget the name right. I'm terrible with names. It's actually something called Venture Stories. So I've
Venture
been trying to
stories.
understand the venture side a little bit, just because
Okay,
I found interest. So this Village Global hosts it. I think they're a venture fund, and it's called Venture Stories. Very interesting because they pick up interesting aspects of it and hear about it. But my all-time favorite podcast is still Pivot.
okay. Obviously, you've recommended it more than
Is my
it's required. Yeah,
go-to podcast twice a week. Yeah, it is my favorite one of all time.
superb. And any TV shows that you recommend or a book?
I'm watching The Boys season 2 right now. If anybody likes to watch really off the radar but unnecessarily gory yet really really wrong in so many ways kind of a show,
Okay,
watch The Boys.
okay.
There's a show called Criminal, which
Criminal.
I recently discovered on Netflix. I saw the promo for season 2 and ended up going back to watching season 1. Each episode is one standalone story. It all happens in one interrogation room, one suspect, same set of people interrogating them every time, and the case gets over in that episode, right? But I just generally like the way that it's in one space. It is all the
Interesting.
characters except for the criminal are the same in most cases. And like what I think season 1 is 3 episodes. I think season 2 is going to be 4
Oh, okay,
episodes.
okay.
So it's a great show. I've really enjoyed that. And in terms of books, I'm just started reading a bunch of books. I've actually been reading a lot about stoicism of late. So
Oh,
I just bought the 3-set book of which Ryan Holiday has written. So stillness is the key, ego is the enemy, and I forget. So those 3 I just bought. So I just started reading them. I've been listening to his podcast and his YouTube videos for a long time. So I decided to
superb.
take the plunge over there.
Brilliant. And again, these are different, not even linked to any or anything. But there is no common factor amongst these things that you're dabbling in.
Yeah, so stoicism actually is something I've discovered through the
Yeah,
lockdown a lot more, and it's really been. I think the one line for me in stoicism that made me want to read more about it was that they talk about this whole point about saying, why worry about something you can't control? Like we're all in a scenario which we can't control.
right.
Only the stuff we can actually do something about is something you should worry about. But why worry about the stuff you can't do anything about? I think for me that has been one of the core things which I've learned in this lockdown is that if I overthink about everything in the world, you can actually get pulled down a lot. But I just focus on what I can control.
Brilliant. Thank you. And these are wonderful recommendations. And the last question, why would relearning not die?
I think if we stop learning, then we lose the core essence of what we are as human beings, right? I mean, as human beings, one of the things that separates us from every other animal is the fact that we constantly learn stuff. We just don't go with the basics. We always want to know something newer.
Yeah,
Also want to learn something which is utterly of no like use, but it's still something we learn. And if we stop learning, we might just stop being human in that sense. So I think that's the most important part of who we are.
super. This entire podcast has been a great learning for me, Varun. And thank you for doing this because, like I said, the people I look up to are already doing my episodes so early. So I don't know what to look up to now. So I probably have to go back to the board. But again, thank you so much, Varun, for doing this. It means
Thanks
a
for calling me.
lot
I
to
had a
me.
lot of fun.
There's a lot to take from that episode. If you like this episode, do like, share, and subscribe. I will ensure I leave Varun's contact details in the description, and we would love to listen to your relearning stories. Do send an email on the relearningpodcast@gmail.com. We are the Relearning Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and Relearn Podcast on Twitter. Until next time, this is Prashant Tekar, and thankfully, relearning is not dead.